Jerome Battle was 44 years old, a structural engineer who spent his career calculating exactly how much weight a structure could bear before it broke. He understood failure points better than anyone. What he never calculated was how long his own marriage had been collapsing underneath him. On a Tuesday, he signed the divorce papers. Generous, reasonable, fair. The way he did everything. Angela walked away with the house, the furniture, and 12 years of a life Jerome had funded entirely on his own. On Friday, he stopped at the same corner store he'd visited every week for 11 years, bought the same 2 tickets he always bought, checked the numbers at home, alone, in a silent apartment, and sat completely still for 45 minutes. 3 days after his ex-wife left him with nothing, Jerome Battle had won $300 million. Angela found out. And what she did next was the single greatest miscalculation of her life. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The cereal was getting soft. Jerome Battle watched it happen. The little squares of wheat slowly absorbing the milk, edges going from crisp to pale and bloated. He did not rush to eat them. He simply watched, spoon resting against the side of the bowl, both hands wrapped around a mug of black coffee that had already gone lukewarm. The kitchen was quiet in a way that felt new, not the quiet of early morning before someone else woke up. A different kind, a permanent kind. The chairs were pushed in straight. The counter was clear. No half-empty wine glass left from the night before. No perfume hanging in the air. Just the low hum of the refrigerator and the sound of a city beginning to stir 6 floors below. The apartment was his. All of it. Every corner, every drawer, every inch of silence. He had moved in 3 weeks ago during the final stretch of the divorce process, when staying in the house became something neither of them pretended made sense. He had chosen this place the same way he chose most things, methodically. Good bones, solid walls, no wasted space. A building engineer could always tell the difference between a structure that was built to last and one that was built to look like it was. He knew the difference better than most. Jerome finished his coffee standing at the sink, rinsed the bowl, and set it in the drying rack. He put on his jacket, picked up his keys, and left. The drive to work took 22 minutes on a good day. This was a good day. Light traffic, clean roads, a gray November sky sitting low and flat over the city. Jerome merged onto the expressway and let the familiar rhythm of the commute settle around him. His hands were steady on the wheel. His face was still. He thought about the papers he had signed yesterday morning, Tuesday, 9:47 a.m. A mediator's office on the 14th floor of a building downtown with beige carpet and a bowl of wrapped peppermints on the table nobody touched. Angela had sat across from him in a cream-colored blazer, looking composed and faintly impatient, like a woman waiting for a meeting to end so she could get on with the rest of her day. He had not begged. He had not raised his voice. When the mediator walked them through the asset division one final time, Jerome confirmed each item without flinching. The house went to Angela. He had agreed to that 2 months prior. The joint accounts were split down the middle. His pension remained his. Her car, already in her name, stayed hers. He had been more than fair. Some people, Nate had told him privately, would have called it generous. Jerome called it done. 12 years. That was the shape of it, viewed from the outside. From the inside, the shape was more complicated. Jerome had carried the finances since year 1. His engineering salary steady and reliable, growing incrementally, providing the kind of dependable foundation that allowed for a certain kind of life. A good house, 2 cars, vacations, dinners at restaurants where the menus didn't have prices listed. Angela had managed the image of that life, and she had done it well. She was beautiful and socially sharp, always the most poised person in any room. In the early years, Jerome had genuinely admired that about her. She could walk into a gathering of strangers and within 40 minutes know who mattered and why. But somewhere in the middle years, year 5, maybe 6, admiration had curdled into something else on her side. He could feel it before he could name it. A cooling. A contempt she didn't fully bother to hide anymore. She called his work boring at a dinner party once, laughing as she said it, touching his arm like it was a joke between them. It was not a joke. She called the life they had small. She said it to her sister on the phone, not knowing he could hear her from the hallway. He had designed load-bearing structures for a living, calculated exactly how much weight a thing could hold before it failed. He had spent 12 years doing that same math on his own marriage and refusing to write down the answer. When she finally said she wanted out, the answer wrote itself. He did not perform grief for her. He did not plead or negotiate his own worth. He called a mediator on a Wednesday and had a first appointment by Friday. Jerome pulled into the firm's parking structure at 7:18 a.m., engine ticking as it cooled. He sat for a moment, just a moment. Then he got out and went to work. That Friday evening, he stopped at Kelvin's corner store the way he always did. 11 years of Fridays. Kelvin knew his face before he knew his name. The bell above the door gave its familiar small sound as Jerome stepped inside, nodding once at the man behind the counter. "The usual?" Kelvin asked. "The usual," Jerome said. "One scratch-off, one Powerball ticket, $2 total." Jerome tucked them into his breast pocket and drove home. He checked the scratch-off first at the kitchen table, under the overhead light. $20. He set it aside. Then he unfolded the Powerball ticket. He pulled up the numbers on his phone. He checked once. He checked twice. He checked a third time, slowly, each number deliberate, his finger moving along the screen like he was reviewing a structural calculation that could not afford to be wrong. Then he set the phone down on the table. He sat completely still for 45 minutes. The refrigerator hummed. The city moved below him. Jerome Battle did not move at all. When he finally stood, he walked to the hall closet, reached to the high shelf, and brought down the fireproof document safe. He placed the ticket inside. He closed the safe. He locked it. He had learned, over 12 years, how to keep things to himself. The drive to Patricia's house took 31 minutes on a Saturday morning. Jerome knew every turn by feel. He had been making this drive his whole adult life, through college breaks, through the early years of the marriage, through the holidays when Angela had preferred to host rather than visit. He knew the way the road narrowed after the railroad crossing, knew the exact moment the neighborhood shifted from commercial to residential, knew the sound his tires made on the cracked concrete of his mother's driveway. He parked and sat for a second. Then he got out. Patricia Battle opened the door before he knocked. She had a way of hearing his car that she had never been able to explain, and he had long stopped questioning. She was 68 years old, small and straight-backed, with close-cropped gray hair, and the kind of eyes that had spent decades watching children lie to her face and learned to read everything behind the words. She looked at him once. She stepped aside and let him in. The house smelled like coffee and dish soap, and something faintly floral. The same smell it had always had, as long as Jerome could remember. The kitchen was warm. 2 mugs were already on the table. He sat down. Patricia poured the coffee and sat across from him. She did not ask how he was feeling. She did not mention the divorce. She simply wrapped both hands around her mug and waited. That was the thing about his mother. She knew how to wait. Jerome looked at the table for a moment. Then he told her. He kept it simple. He said he had bought his ticket Friday evening the way he always did. He said he had checked the numbers at home. He told her the amount. Patricia set her cup down. She set it down carefully with both hands, like something she did not want to spill. She was quiet for a long moment. Her face did not collapse. Her eyes did not go wide and bright. She looked at her son and said, What are you going to do?" Jerome almost smiled. Of all the people in his life, she was the only one who would ask that first. "I don't know yet," he said. "That's why I'm here." He called Nate from the kitchen table while Patricia refilled their cups. Nathaniel Ford answered on the second ring, voice easy and unhurried the way it always was. Jerome kept his own voice level. He told Nate he needed to talk, that it was important, and that he needed him to listen before he said anything. Nate listened. When Jerome finished, the line was quiet for 3 full seconds. Then Nate said, "Does Angela know?" Not congratulations. Not, "Are you serious right now?" The first thing out of his mouth was the one question that actually mattered. And that was why Jerome had called him. "No," Jerome said. "Good." Nate was already thinking. Jerome could hear it. "Don't move that ticket. Don't tell anyone else. I'll be there in 40 minutes. The 3 of them sat around Patricia's kitchen table just before noon. Nate had brought a notepad. He sat with a pen in his hand and his reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, the way he always looked when he was working through a problem. They laid it out, plainly. The divorce had been finalized on Tuesday. The ticket was purchased on Friday. 3 days of separation. Clean on paper. But clean on paper and safe from challenge were 2 different things, and all 3 of them understood it. She could argue pattern, Nate said, that the ticket was part of a marital habit, that the funds used came from a shared financial life. It's a stretch, but a lawyer can dress up a stretch. Jerome nodded slowly. Then I need documentation that proves otherwise. Time-stamped receipt. Bank record showing the $2 came from my personal account. The one separated per the mediation agreement 6 weeks ago. Security footage from the store, Nate added, writing it down. Kelvin will have it, Jerome said. He keeps 30 days. Patricia had been quiet through most of this. She was listening the same way she always listened, fully, without interrupting. But Jerome noticed she had not moved to refill her coffee in a while. She was sitting with her hands flat on the table, looking at something in the middle distance. He noticed. He waited. She stood without a word and left the kitchen. She came back 2 minutes later, carrying a manila folder. It was slightly worn at the edges, the kind of folder that had been handled and refiled many times. She set it on the table in front of Jerome. He opened it. Inside were printed sheets, credit card statements, mostly, along with a few bank records. He turned the first page, then the second. His eyes moved slowly down the columns. Dates, amounts, account references, small withdrawals, redirected transfers. The pattern was not subtle once you saw it. You just had to be looking. $400, $600, $800, month after month, beginning in what looked like year 7 of the marriage. All of it moving quietly into an account under a name Jerome recognized immediately. Dorian Prescott, Angela's brother. Jerome stared at the folder. The refrigerator hummed. Nate had gone very still. Jerome looked up at his mother. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for keeping this." Patricia held his gaze. She gave one small nod. Jerome reached for his phone. Vivian Cross did not waste words. She was on the phone with Jerome for 11 minutes Monday evening, and in those 11 minutes she outlined exactly what needed to happen, in what order, and why. Her voice was even and precise, the kind of voice that did not leave room for misunderstanding. "You're going to claim through a trust," she said. "The trust holds the ticket, not you. Your name appears nowhere in the public record. This is standard. It is legal. And it is what anyone in your position with competent counsel does." Jerome wrote it down word for word. "I'll have the trust documents drawn up by Wednesday," Vivian continued. "We file Thursday. The commission processes within 10 business days. By the time anyone outside this room knows Jerome Battle won anything, the money will already be insulated." Jerome said, "All right." That was the whole conversation. The trust was named Cedarline Holdings. Jerome had chosen the name himself. It meant nothing to anyone, which was precisely the point. There was no press release, no lottery commission photo, no oversized check. Jerome did not want any of that, and Vivian had structured everything to ensure he did not have to have it. The claim was filed on a Thursday morning. By the following Tuesday, it was processed. Jerome went to work both days. He ate lunch at his desk. He drove home in traffic. He did not tell anyone new. He did not change a single visible thing about his life, because Vivian had been clear, and he was a man who followed clear instructions from people he trusted. He felt, mostly, like a man waiting for a structure to settle. You built something, you tested it, and then you waited to see where the stress went. He did not have to wait long. What Jerome did not know, not yet, was what had been happening on the other side. Dorian Prescott had a contact, a man he had met years ago at an industry event, someone who worked in the administrative side of the Lottery Commission and had, on more than one occasion, shared information he was not supposed to share in exchange for things Dorian had been willing to provide. It was the kind of arrangement that lived in the space between reckless and criminal, and had never, until now, produced anything significant enough to matter. This time it did. The contact matched a submitted employee identification number to an existing record. Jerome had used his work ID as secondary verification on the claim. Standard procedure. The contact ran it. It came back with a name. Dorian had the information by Friday afternoon. He called his sister before he finished reading it. Jerome's phone rang at 7:14 that evening. He looked at the screen. He already knew, in a structural way, the way you know a load is shifting before you hear the sound, what this call was. He had not expected it this fast, but he was not surprised. He answered. "Jerome!" Angela's voice was warm, careful, shaped into something that sounded like concern. "I'm so glad you picked up. I heard something, and I honestly didn't know if it was even true, but I thought if it was, I'd want to hear it from you." He said nothing. He let the silence sit. "Are you okay?" she said. "That's really what I'm calling about, just to make sure you're okay." "I'm fine, Angela." "Good." A breath. "That's good." A pause that was calibrated to feel spontaneous. "I heard something kind of unbelievable, and I don't want to be that person, I really don't. I'm genuinely happy for you, if it's true. I want you to know that. There are no hard feelings on my end." Jerome listened. He let her go on. She talked for another minute and a half. She said she had been thinking about how things ended between them, how she hoped they could be adult about all of it. She said she didn't want anything ugly. She said the timing of everything was just, interesting. And she thought, maybe they should sit down and talk. As reasonable people, two people who had shared 12 years of their lives. "I just think we should discuss the timing of things," she said, gently. The way you'd say something you wanted to seem like a suggestion when it was actually a demand. Given how recent everything is, Jerome had been sitting at his kitchen table while she spoke. He looked at the surface of it, plain wood, small apartment table, nothing special. He thought about what Vivian had said. He thought about the folder his mother had kept in a filing cabinet for 2 years. Then he spoke. "The ticket was purchased on the 14th, he said. "We finalized on the 11th. I have the receipt, the timestamp, the security footage from the store, and a bank statement showing the $2 came from my personal account, the one separated per the mediation agreement 6 weeks prior." He paused once. "My attorney will be in touch." The line was quiet. When Angela finally spoke, her voice had changed. Not much, just enough. "Jerome." Soft now. Careful in a different way. "We were married for 12 years. Jerome said, "I know. I was there." He ended the call. 22 seconds later, Angela called Dorian back. Angela made the call at 8:47 the next morning. The attorney's name was Preston Hale. He had a corner office downtown and a reputation for being expensive, aggressive, and effective in that order. Angela had done her research. She had written down 3 names and circled his. She spoke to him for 30 minutes. By the end of it, she had retained him. By noon, the filing was done. The claim argued that the lottery ticket, while purchased after the divorce was finalized, represented a continuation of a marital behavioral pattern. Jerome had purchased lottery tickets every Friday for 11 years, during the marriage, with household income. Angela's attorneys framed those 11 years as the foundation, the habit as the asset, and the timing as suspicious enough to warrant investigation and relief. It was a stretch. Angela knew it. Preston Hale knew it. But a stretch was not a dismissal. A stretch was an opening. The second filing came an hour later, a motion for a temporary financial freeze on the Cedar Line Holdings Trust. The argument: Jerome should not be permitted to move, transfer, or spend the winnings while the marital asset claim was under review. Angela signed everything at Preston Hale's conference room table, calm and composed, her handwriting neat and unhurried. Then she went to lunch. She called Renee first, then Marcus and Diane, then her cousin Teresa, who would tell everyone in the family who mattered within 48 hours. The story Angela told was consistent. She had practiced it, though she would never have admitted that. 12 years. That was always the first thing. 12 years said before anything else, so the weight of it was already in the room. 12 years. And I don't think people understand what I put into that marriage. Jerome is brilliant. He really is. I've always said that. But the life we had, I helped build that. I was there for all of it. And now, the week after we finalize, he wins $300 million? A pause. Measured. Just long enough. I'm not trying to be ugly about it. That's not who I am. I just think the timing deserves a conversation. That's all I've ever asked for. A conversation. Renee said it was unbelievable. Marcus said Angela deserved better. Teresa said she had always felt something was off about the way Jerome handled things. Angela listened to each of them with gratitude that looked like sadness. She thanked them for understanding. She said she just didn't want to feel like those 12 years meant nothing. The thing was, and this was the part that made Angela genuinely dangerous, she was not entirely performing. Somewhere beneath the strategy, she believed it. She had spent so many years telling herself the story of the marriage, as a partnership she had managed and sustained, that the story had become real to her. Jerome's steady income, his stable career, the house, the life, in Angela's private accounting, those things existed because she had chosen him, stayed with him, shaped the environment that allowed him to thrive. She did not see a man she had drained. She saw a return on an investment she felt she was owed. Vivian Cross filed her discovery requests the same week the civil claim landed. She worked methodically. Financial records, communications, correspondence between Angela and Preston Hale's office. Standard discovery in a post-divorce asset dispute. Nothing aggressive. Nothing that would signal what she was actually looking for. What she found took 11 days to fully confirm. She called Jerome on a Wednesday and asked him to come in. He sat across from her desk, and she placed a single printed document in front of him. Clean, plain paper. A timeline. Annotated. Angela's attorney was retained on the 9th, Vivian said. Dorian's call to Angela happened on the 12th. Based on the communications we pulled, Hale's office began preliminary case research on the 10th. Jerome looked at the paper. Dorian didn't stumble onto information and bring it to his sister, Vivian continued. He was already looking. He had a paid contact monitoring your financial activity through the Lottery Commission's employee-linked data system. That arrangement was established 18 months ago. She tapped the document once. Before Angela filed for divorce, Jerome did not speak. She didn't leave when the marriage fell apart, Vivian said. She left when her models told her there was nothing significant left to capture. She had been watching your accounts, your filings, your activity. When nothing spiked, no inheritance, no investment, no windfall, she filed. She timed the exit for maximum extraction with minimum competition. Jerome picked up the document. He read it again, slowly, from the top. "I'll need to keep the original," Vivian said. "But I had that copy made for you." He sat in his car in the parking garage beneath Vivienne's building for 3 minutes. Not longer. 3 minutes exactly. He checked. He looked at the document in his hands. He thought about the man who had eaten cereal alone at a kitchen table 3 weeks ago, and believed, in some quiet place he hadn't fully examined, that the marriage had simply run its course, that 2 people had grown apart, that it was sad, but it was honest. He thought about that man for 3 minutes. He thought about what that man had trusted, and why, and what it had cost him. Then he folded the document carefully, placed it in his bag, and got out of the car. He went back to work. The lights were already on when Jerome pulled into his mother's driveway. It was just past 6. The sun was dropping behind the tree line, turning the sky a dull orange. Through the front window he could see the glow of the kitchen. Patricia moved past it once, then again. She was cooking something. She always cooked when she knew he was coming. He sat in the car for a moment before going in. She had made smothered chicken and rice, the kind she made when he was a boy, and something hard had happened at school. She did not ask him if he was hungry. She just set a plate in front of him when he sat down. He ate a few bites, then he set down his fork and told her what Vivian had found. Patricia stood at the counter with her arms folded loosely across her chest. She listened without asking him to slow down or repeat anything. Her face stayed even. She nodded once when he told her about the surveillance arrangement. She nodded again when he told her about the attorney being retained 3 days before Dorian's call. She did not look surprised. That was the thing that stayed with Jerome. She did not look surprised at all. When he finished, the kitchen was quiet. The faucet dripped once. The refrigerator hummed. Patricia unfolded her arms. She said, "I need to show you something." She walked out of the kitchen. He heard the hallway closet open, the one she used as a second filing cabinet, stuffed with folders and accordion binders and rubber-banded envelopes she had organized with the same system she used for her classroom attendance records. He heard her moving things, a drawer sliding, paper shifting. She came back carrying a manila envelope, the kind with the metal clasp bent flat on both sides. She set it on the table in front of him and sat down across from him. "Year 4 of your marriage," she said. "You called me. You said there had been a medical billing issue. Something had gone wrong with the insurance processing. A claim had been kicked back, and it had snowballed. You said you and Angela were short. You were embarrassed to ask." Jerome looked at the envelope. "You asked if I could help cover it while you straightened things out. You said 22,000. Patricia's voice did not waver. "You said you'd pay me back when the correction came through." Jerome remembered. He remembered being ashamed of the call. He remembered Angela sitting across from him at the kitchen table, the bills spread out, her voice tight with worry that he now understood had been rehearsed. "I took it from the retirement account," Patricia said. "I didn't tell you that part at the time. I didn't want you to feel worse about asking." The refrigerator kept humming. Jerome did not move. "A couple of years later, you left a folder here by accident when you came for Christmas. You were going through some old paperwork in the guest room, and you left a folder behind when you packed up." She tapped the envelope once with 2 fingers. "I found it the day after you drove home. Inside were some financial statements. I don't think you even knew you had them. But I looked at them. I looked long enough." She opened the metal clasp. She took out the documents and laid them on the table between them. They were old. The paper had softened at the edges. Some of the ink had faded to a pale gray. But the numbers were still clear. Account numbers, transfer dates, dollar amounts. A name, Dorian's name, appearing at the end of a chain of redirected funds that had no medical billing office anywhere in it. There was no billing error, Patricia said quietly. Dorian had run a business venture into the ground that year. He needed money he didn't have. Angela got it for him. She let that sit for a second. She got it from you. And when you didn't have enough, she got it from me. Jerome looked at the documents. He looked at his mother's handwriting in the margins, small, neat pencil notes she had made to herself as she worked through it. Dates circled, lines drawn between entries, the same careful notation she had used on lesson plans for 30 years. She had sat alone with this knowledge. She had organized it. She had filed it. She had kept it for years without saying a word. He sat completely still. He read the documents once the way he read everything, slowly, from the top, without skipping. He read them again. His mother's retirement savings, $22,000, gone to cover a debt Dorian owed, moved through Angela's hands like it was nothing. Like Patricia Battle's money was a resource to be located and used and never returned. The chicken was getting cold on his plate. He didn't notice. Finally, he looked up. "Why didn't you tell me?" Patricia looked at her son for a long moment. Her expression was not apologetic. It was something older and more complicated than that. "Because you loved her, baby," she said. "And I wasn't going to be the reason you looked at her differently if it wasn't time yet." Jerome drove home in silence. No radio, no phone calls, just the road and the dark and the sound of the engine, steady and low. He did not let himself think in full sentences. He just drove. He was in bed by 9:30. In the morning, he called Vivian before he made coffee. Vivian called at 7:53. Jerome was still standing at the kitchen counter, still holding his phone from the call he'd just ended with her before she called back with the final detail. He set down his coffee mug and listened. "They got the preliminary hearing," Vivian said. "Judge Calloway granted it. It's procedural. It doesn't mean anything about the merits yet. But Angela's team is going to read it as a win." "Let them," Jerome said. "I intend to." He could hear papers moving on her end. "It actually helps us. It gives me the hearing room I need to put everything on the table at once. If they want a formal proceeding, I'll give them one." Jerome said he understood. He thanked her and hung up. He finished his coffee standing at the window, watching the street below. A woman was walking a dog. A kid was on a bicycle. The morning looked like every other morning. Word reached him about the property listings through Nate, who had heard it from a college friend who still moved in the same circles as Angela's crowd. She had been showing people her phone. Listings in a newer development on the north side of the city. Wide driveways, high ceilings, the kind of neighborhood where the houses all had names like Stonecrest or the Addison. She'd told at least 2 people she was thinking about opening a boutique. A clothing boutique, carefully curated, something that reflected her taste. She had told one of them she'd been putting the idea off for years, but now the timing finally made sense. She had said it the way people say things when they already believe the money is theirs. Jerome heard all of this. He did not make any calls. He did not send any messages. He let the information sit inside him the way he let most things sit. Quietly, usefully, without urgency. He went to work. He reviewed load calculations on a bridge project in the 3rd District. He ate lunch at his desk. He drove home. Behind the scenes, Vivian was building something. She worked with the precision of someone who had done this many times before, who understood that a case was not won by the biggest argument, but by the most complete one. She assembled every piece they had, and ordered it the way a prosecutor would. No gaps, no soft spots. The surveillance arrangement and its timeline went in first. The documentation showing Angela's attorney had been retained before Dorian's supposed discovery. The data trail from the Lottery Commission contact Dorian had paid. Then the credit card statements Patricia had kept for 2 years. The systematic transfers into Dorian's account. Month after month. 7 years of it. Patient and quiet and deliberate. Then, Patricia's document, the manufactured billing crisis, the $22,000, the paper trail that showed exactly where the money had gone, and exactly whose name was at the end of it. Then the affidavit from Marcus Webb, who owned the corner store on Delmont Street and had known Jerome by his first name for nearly a decade. Marcus had signed a sworn statement confirming that Jerome Battle came in every Friday evening without exception, that he always bought one scratch-off and one Powerball ticket, and that this had been his habit for as long as Marcus could remember. Marcus had written in his own hand at the bottom of the affidavit, "He's one of the most regular customers I've ever had." Then the forensic accounting. Nate had sourced the specialist, a woman named Dr. Carol Bryce, who worked financial fraud cases and charged accordingly. She had taken the records Vivian provided and traced every dollar Angela had moved across the 7-year period. She worked backward and forward, cross-referencing account activity against dates, amounts, and transfer patterns. Her final number was $41,000, not $400 here and $800 there, $41,000 total. Redirected out of the marital estate over 84 months. Documented. Sourced. Named. Jerome read the forensic report on a Wednesday evening at his kitchen table. He read every page. He did not rush. When he was done, he closed the report and set it to his right and sat for a while with his hands flat on the table. Then he picked up his phone and called Dorian. Dorian answered on the third ring. He sounded careful even in that single word. "Yeah?" Like he already knew he shouldn't pick up and had done it anyway. Jerome kept his voice even. He told Dorian he knew about the financial monitoring arrangement. He told him he knew about the contact at the Lottery Commission. He told him that Vivian had documented all of it, the surveillance setup, the timeline, the data leak, and that anyone who had participated in the unauthorized monitoring of his personal financial accounts was carrying potential civil and criminal exposure. He did not raise his voice. He did not make it sound like a threat. He said it the way he would state a load calculation, factually, precisely, without embellishment. Then he said, "I just wanted you to know that." And he hung up. Dorian called Angela inside 20 minutes. She picked up on the first ring. She had been sitting in her living room with her laptop open, one of the property listings still bright on the screen. "Jerome called me," Dorian said. Her expression changed, not all at once, just a small shift. Something behind her eyes that tightened and went still. "What did he say?" she asked. Dorian showed up at Angela's door at 8:30. She saw his face through the glass panel before she even opened it. He looked like a man who had been replaying something in his head for the past 2 hours, and had not liked it any better the second time than the first. She let him in. She did not offer coffee. "Tell me exactly what he said," she told him. Dorian sat on the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees, and repeated it. All of it. The surveillance arrangement. The Lottery Commission contact. The civil and criminal exposure. The way Jerome had laid it out. Flat, calm, no hesitation. Like he was reading from a document. "He wasn't angry?" Angela asked. "That's the thing," Dorian said. "He wasn't anything. He just said it. Like he was telling me the weather." Angela crossed her arms and moved to the window. Outside, the street was dark and quiet. A light was on in the house across the way. "That's Jerome," she said. "That's always been Jerome. He performs calm because he doesn't know what else to do with himself. It's a front. Angela, it's a front, Dorian. I lived with that man for 12 years. I know how he operates. He gets quiet when he's scared. He gets still when he doesn't have a move." She turned from the window. "He made that call to rattle you, and it worked." Dorian looked at her for a long moment. "I don't think he was rattling me," he said. "I think he was telling me the truth. He wants you to think that. And what if he actually has all of it? What if Vivian actually documented everything he said she did?" He shook his head. "He mentioned the commission contact by name, Angela. He didn't say, someone. He said the name. Something moved across Angela's face. Quick, almost invisible. She smoothed it over fast. "Then we deal with that," she said. "My attorney already knows the exposure points. We've talked through all of it. He knew things your attorney isn't supposed to know yet. Discovery works both ways." Dorian stood up. He was not a tall man, but he seemed to take up more space when he was standing, like the discomfort had nowhere else to go. He looked at his sister, really looked at her, and when he spoke again, his voice was quieter than it had been all evening. "You always underestimate him," he said. "You've done it for 12 years, and I think you're doing it right now." The room held that for a second. Angela's expression didn't break, but something beneath it went very, very still. "I know what I'm doing," she said. Dorian picked up his jacket from the arm of the couch. He didn't say anything else. He walked to the door, opened it, and left, without looking back. Angela stood in the middle of her living room and listened to his car pull out of the driveway. Then she opened her laptop. The property listings were still on the screen. The wide driveways, the high ceilings, the kind of quiet that cost money. She minimized the tab without closing it and pulled up the folder her attorney had sent. The procedural outline, the hearing notes, the argument they had built around marital behavioral pattern and financial continuity. It was a real argument. Her attorney had said so. It was a stretch in some jurisdictions, but Judge Calloway had already granted the preliminary hearing, which meant the door was open. She just had to walk through it. She read through the folder twice, taking notes on a yellow legal pad in her careful, even handwriting. Jerome was methodical. Fine. She was methodical too. She had been planning longer than he knew. She had been patient. She had positioned herself carefully, and she had not come this far to fold because Dorian got spooked by a phone call. She stayed at the table until after midnight. Jerome was at Patricia's house by 6:30. Patricia had made chicken and rice. Simple, warm, enough for two. She set the table and Jerome sat down, and they ate the way they had always eaten together, without needing to fill the space. The television was on low in the other room. Outside, the neighborhood had gone quiet. After dinner, Jerome washed the dishes. Patricia dried. She handed him a dish towel without asking, and he took it without comment, and they stood at the sink together the way they had stood at that same sink when he was 17 years old. They watched television for the rest of the evening. A nature program Patricia liked, something about birds in migration. Jerome sat in the chair by the window and watched without really tracking it, his hands resting easy in his lap. Patricia did not mention the case. Neither did he. At 10 o'clock, Jerome told her good night, and she patted his hand once, briefly, firmly, the way she had always done, when words were beside the point. He went to the small back bedroom that still had his old dresser in it and a quilt she had made 20 years ago. He changed clothes. He lay down. He was asleep before 10:15. The hearing was in the morning. The conference room was on the 4th floor. It was a plain room, long table, gray carpet, fluorescent light that buzzed just enough to notice, a pitcher of water in the center that no one touched. Jerome had been in rooms like this his entire career. Rooms where something got decided, where the math either held or it didn't. He arrived 7 minutes early. Vivienne was already there, her documents arranged in 3 neat stacks in front of her chair. She did not look up when Jerome sat down. She was reading something, moving her pen along a line of text, with quiet precision. Jerome poured himself a glass of water and set it to the right of his notepad. He did not look at the door. Angela arrived 4 minutes later. She had dressed carefully. A dark blazer, understated jewelry, her hair pulled back in a way that said, composed without trying too hard. Jerome had seen her dress for rooms before. He knew what it meant when Angela dressed for a room. She was performing before she ever opened her mouth. She took her seat across the table. Her attorney, a broad man named Garrett with a practiced expression of mild confidence, settled in beside her and opened a leather portfolio with a small snap. Angela looked at Jerome. Jerome looked at the table. The mediating officer entered, exchanged brief acknowledgments with both attorneys, and confirmed the terms of the session. Standard procedure. Jerome listened to every word. Vivian opened first. She did not raise her voice. She never did. She simply placed the first document in front of the officer and began to speak, and the room tightened around her words. The temporary freeze motion rests on the claim that the lottery ticket in question represents a marital asset, she said. We will demonstrate that it does not, clearly and without ambiguity. She laid it out in sequence. The time-stamped receipt from the corner store, 7:14 p.m., Friday the 14th. The certified bank record showing the $2 debit from Jerome's separate personal account, an account that had been formally divided and documented during mediation 6 weeks prior. The store's security footage, already reviewed and authenticated, showing Jerome at the counter at the time stamped on the receipt. 3 pieces, clean, independent, corroborating each other without overlap. The divorce was finalized on the 11th. The ticket was purchased on the 14th, from a separate account, by one person. Garrett leaned toward Angela and said something low and fast. Angela's expression did not change, but her jaw shifted just slightly. He pivoted. Jerome had expected the pivot. Garrett argued the marital pattern angle, that Jerome's 11-year habit of purchasing lottery tickets was itself a marital behavior, established and sustained during the marriage, funded by household economic activity, and therefore subject to equitable consideration regardless of the precise date of purchase. It was a stretch. Jerome had known it was a stretch when Vivian first told him about it 2 weeks ago, but it was a real argument. It had teeth, if you didn't look too closely. Vivian let him finish. Then she placed the second set of documents on the table. Opposing counsel's firm was retained, she said, on the 11th. A pause, small, deliberate. The divorce was finalized on the 11th. The lottery claim was not filed until the 14th, through a blind trust. Mr. Battle's name did not appear in any public-facing record at that time. The question the court should find relevant is this: why was opposing counsel retained on the exact day of the divorce, 3 days before the alleged discovery of the lottery claim, if this case is a response to a lottery win? She placed the documentation in front of the officer, the retainer date, the trust filing date, the timeline, side by side. Because it was not a response, Vivian said. It was a continuation of an 18-month financial surveillance arrangement paid for by Ms. Battle, designed to monitor Mr. Battle's economic activity and identify the optimal moment to maximize extraction. Garrett said, "Objection. This is mediation," the officer said mildly. Garrett closed his mouth. Angela reached for the pitcher of water. Her hand was steady. Jerome noticed that she made sure it was steady. Garrett asked for a recess. They got 10 minutes. Jerome stood, walked to the window, and looked down at the street below. Vivian stood beside him and said nothing. There was nothing to say. He already knew what came next. When Garrett and Angela returned, something had shifted. Not in Angela's posture, she had corrected that, but in the quality of Garrett's attention. He was no longer leaning forward. Vivian placed the third set of documents on the table. 7 years of transfers into an account under Dorian Prescott's name. $400, $800, $600. Month after month, methodical and patient, for 84 months. The forensic accountant's summary at the end. $41,260. Redirected, documented, traceable. Then, Patricia's affidavit. 4 pages, signed and notarized. The manufactured billing crisis in year 4. The $22,000 Patricia had withdrawn from her retirement account to help her son cover a shortfall that had never been real. Garrett was quiet. Not thinking quiet, finished quiet. The temporary freeze was denied. The civil claim, the officer noted, appeared to lack the evidentiary foundation required to proceed. Jerome picked up his pen and set it back down. Then he looked up. Across the table, Angela was staring at the documents in front of Garrett. Her posture was still perfect. Her expression was still arranged. But something underneath it had gone hollow, the way a wall looks right before the structure behind it fails. Jerome looked at her directly. He did not speak. He did not move. He simply held her gaze. 1 second. 2. 5. Angela looked away. The mediating officer gathered his copies. Garrett was already stacking documents into his portfolio, his movements efficient in the way of a man who wanted to be somewhere else. Vivian was organizing her 3 stacks back into a single folder, unhurried, methodical. Angela had not moved. Jerome pushed his chair back and stood. He picked up his pen and his notepad and set them both in his bag. Then he looked across the table at Vivienne. "I need 5 minutes," he said. "Alone." Vivian looked up from her folder. Her eyes moved from Jerome to Angela and back again. She pressed her lips together once, a small motion, the only sign of what she was weighing. "Jerome." "5 minutes," he said again. Same tone, same volume. She looked at him for a long moment. Whatever she was reading in his face, it was enough. She closed the folder, picked it up, and looked toward the door. 5 minutes, she said. Not agreement, exactly. Just the number returned to him. The mediating officer had already stepped out. Garrett glanced at Angela, who gave him a small nod. He followed Vivian into the hallway. The door closed. The room went quiet. Just the fluorescent light, still buzzing. The pitcher of water no one had touched. Angela spoke before Jerome had fully turned toward her. "The monitoring was Dorian's idea," she said. "I want you to know that. That whole thing, the contact at the commission, the arrangement, that was him. I didn't even know the details of how he set it up." She paused. "I was scared, Jerome. After 12 years, I didn't know what I was going to have. I didn't know what my life was going to look like. And I know how this all appears, but—" She kept going. He let her. He stood near his chair with his bag at his side, and he listened to every word without expression, without movement, without giving her anything to navigate toward or away from. She talked about fear. She talked about feeling invisible in the marriage. She talked about the years she had given. She said, near the end, her voice dropping into something that might have been genuine, that she had loved him once. She stopped. The room was quiet again. Jerome set his bag down on the chair beside him. He did not sit. He stood with his hands loose at his sides, and he looked at her with the same steady attention he had given the documents all morning. "You planned it," he said. "Not the lottery. You didn't know about that. But the exit. You planned that. You were 18 months out before you filed. You were watching my accounts, looking for the right moment. Not because the marriage broke down. Because you decided on the number you wanted to leave with. And you were waiting until the conditions were right." Angela opened her mouth. "I'm not finished," he said. "Quiet, not hard, just clear." She closed it. 7 years, he said. 400 here, 800 there. 84 months of moving money out of a shared account into one your brother's name was on, so the paper trail looked clean. $41,000. That was methodical. That took discipline. He paused. "I'll give you that." He pulled out the chair beside him and rested one hand on the back of it. "Year 4, he said. "You came to me with a medical billing problem. You said it was a mistake, an error, something that needed to be covered quickly. I believed you. I went to my mother." He stopped for a moment, just a moment. "She gave me $22,000 from her retirement. She didn't hesitate. She didn't ask questions. She did it because I needed it, and she trusted me, and I trusted you. There was no billing error. You used that money to cover Dorian's debt. You let my mother spend her retirement savings to clean up a mess you made And you never said a word about it. Not once. Angela's face had gone still. Not the careful still from before. Something underneath it had come loose. That's who you decided to be, Jerome said. Not in one moment. Over and over, across 12 years, you made that choice. And every time, you made it. He picked his bag back up. I was never passive, he said. I was patient. There's a difference. You spent 12 years thinking you had a man you could manage. What you had was a man who chose to trust you. He looked at her one more time. Steady, unblinking. I won't make that mistake again. He walked to the door. Jerome. His name in her voice. The same voice that had said it across 1,000 ordinary mornings, across a dinner table, across a dark room, across 12 years of a life he had built, and she had spent. He did not turn around. He opened the door. Vivian was standing in the hallway, folder under her arm, her expression even and calm. Jerome stepped out. The door swung shut behind him. He nodded once to Vivienne. She fell into step beside him without a word, and together they walked down the hallway toward the elevator, toward the lobby, toward the glass doors that opened out into the bright, flat light of the afternoon. Dorian called Vivienne's office 4 days after the hearing. He didn't ask for a deal. He just said he had documents and he wanted to know what cooperation was worth. Vivienne told him, plainly and without warmth, exactly what it was worth. Full exclusion from the countersuit in exchange for everything he had. Every record, every communication, every piece of paper that touched the surveillance arrangement, the commission contact, and the transfers. Dorian agreed before she finished the sentence. He brought 3 folders and a thumb drive to her office on a Wednesday morning. Jerome was not there. He didn't need to be. The documents Dorian provided closed every remaining door. Not just the ones Angela had already tried. The ones she might have tried later. In 6 months? In 2 years? In some quieter moment when she thought the attention had moved on. Vivian reviewed everything, filed what needed to be filed, and sent Jerome a single text that evening. It's done. Call me tomorrow. Jerome called at 7 the next morning. Vivian told him the countersuit would proceed, and that based on what Dorian had provided, Angela had no viable path forward. Not now. Not later. And Dorian? Jerome asked. Excluded, Vivian said. Per the agreement. Jerome was quiet for a moment. Okay, he said. That was all. The countersuit took 11 weeks. Angela's attorney filed 2 motions to delay. Both denied. When the judgment came down, it was clear and it was documented. $41,000 in redirected marital funds, plus legal fees, plus interest on the principal. Angela owed it. The number was real, and the obligation was enforceable, attached to her name in the public record like a stone tied to something that wanted to float. She paid it in installments. The boutique never opened. The property listings she'd been sharing with her friend were closed sometime around the 4th week after the hearing, quietly, without announcement. A few of their mutual friends heard what had happened through people who had been in rooms Angela didn't know about. A cousin of Jerome's told someone at a family gathering. Nate mentioned it, briefly and factually, to a man they both knew from college. No campaign, no performance. Just the truth, moving at the pace. Truth moves when it no longer has anything to hide from. Angela still had her social circle. It was just smaller than it used to be, and the people in it were different people than before, and she knew it, even if she didn't say it out loud. 18 months after the hearing, Jerome's house sat on a quiet street where the trees were old enough that their roots had started lifting the edge of the sidewalk. He had looked at 12 houses before this one. He chose it because of the driveway, long and straight, lined on both sides by oak trees that turned gold in October. He liked pulling in at the end of the day and feeling the light change as the branches closed overhead. It was a modest house, 4 rooms, 2 floors, a back porch that needed a new board on the second step. He fixed it himself on a Saturday in March, with a cup of coffee cooling beside him on the railing. He still went to work. He was a structural engineer. He built things. Money hadn't changed that, and he hadn't wanted it to. The Patricia Battle Foundation had funded its first cohort of students 8 months in. 43 kids across 5 schools. STEM materials, after-school programming, 2 full scholarships to technical programs for graduating seniors. Patricia had cried when Jerome showed her the brochure. She said he was doing too much. He said he was just getting started. Nate's firm managed a portion of the trust. They had lunch every 2 weeks, alternating who picked the place, and they almost never talked about money when they were eating. They talked about basketball. They talked about Nate's daughter, who had just started walking. Sometimes they just sat, and the silence was the comfortable kind. The kind that only existed between people who had known each other long enough that they didn't need to fill it. Jerome was seeing someone. Her name was Renata. She worked in civil infrastructure planning, and the first time they talked at a conference in Atlanta, she had spent 20 minutes asking about a bridge rehabilitation project he'd consulted on before she ever asked anything personal. He liked that. He liked the way she listened, like she was actually storing what he said. It was early still. Neither of them had said anything that couldn't be unsaid. But he thought about her on the drive home most days, which felt like something. Patricia's kitchen had a new table, solid oak, 8 chairs. Jerome had it delivered on a Sunday and assembled it himself, while she stood in the doorway telling him she didn't need a new table. "I know," he said, tightening the last bolt. "The old one was perfectly fine." "I know." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "It's beautiful, baby." He stood up and looked at it. "Yeah," he said. "It is." On a Friday evening, Jerome pulled into the small lot beside the corner store and parked in the same spot he always used, close to the door, second space from the left. Inside, the owner looked up from behind the counter. His name was Mr. Osei, and he had known Jerome by face for 11 years and by name for about 9. "Jerome," he said. "How's business?" Jerome said. "Same as always. Can't complain." Jerome set $2 on the counter. 1 scratch-off, 1 Powerball ticket. The same as always. Mr. Osei slid them across without being asked. Jerome scratched the ticket in the parking lot, leaning against his car in the early evening air. He checked the Powerball numbers on his phone when he got home, standing at the kitchen counter with his bag still on his shoulder. He didn't win. He set the tickets on the counter, hung his bag by the door, and walked out to the back porch. The second step held. The yard was dark except for the light coming through the kitchen window, falling in a long rectangle across the grass. He stood there in the quiet. It wasn't the quiet of a man waiting. It wasn't the quiet of a man who had learned to make do with silence because the alternative was worse. It was just quiet. His house, his porch, his evening. He had chosen every piece of it. He stood there for a while, and then he went inside. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.